Okay, it is 6:45, so we will go ahead and get started. Um, so it's an honor to introduce our esteemed guest speaker this morning, Dr. Peter Hwang, for our department's grand rounds. He's an internationally recognized leader in rhinology and skull-based surgery. He's a UCSF residency alum, completed his fellowship at UPenn, and has led the Division of Rhinology and Endoscopic Skull-Based Surgery at Stanford since 2005. He currently serves as vice chair there, and he has over a decade of leadership experience. He's been involved in the American Rhinologic Society for over a decade and was their president from 2016 to 2017. He has a prolific research career. He's published 365 research articles, served as an associate journal editor for multiple journals, and has co-edited an award-winning textbook on rhinology. And he's also an entrepreneur. He's created a company that uses acoustic resonance therapy to decrease nasal congestion. And we're fortunate today to have him here to share some of those lessons with us in medical entrepreneurship. So thank you so much, Dr. Hwang, for being with us today.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you to the department. It's really an honor to be able to uh, speak with you today. And I just want to express my appreciation for my time at UCSF. I spent 9 years at UCSF as a student and then as a resident, and particularly during my otolaryngology training was really foundational for my career, and so appreciative to all of the professors and staff who invested in us as residents. And I think you're all extremely fortunate to be training there. And particular thanks to Dr. Muir, who was one of my attendings. And I think Dr. Chung was my senior resident, a little bit as an attending. And I think the rest of the faculty has turned over, but if I missed anybody, my apologies. My talk today is a talk that's a little different from what I usually speak about. And this is just some comments about my side journey doing consulting work and other entrepreneurial activities. And it's really become a great part of my career, very fulfilling, an area where I can express a lot of creativity and innovation. So my disclosures, there will be conflicts of interest discussed here because I will talk a little bit about the company that I'm a co-founder of, that's Sound Health. And so there is a conflict of interest there, but it's the nature of the talk. So I think it's unavoidable. So what does innovation look like in otolaryngology? Well, I think right now we would think about things like any kind of AI application, computer application, something very futuristic. And that's certainly the case, that there's a great future in computer applications in otolaryngology. But this can be innovative as well, a water bottle and salt. And this in rhinology is one of the great innovations in the last couple of decades. When I was a resident, this is what we taught patients to use to irrigate their sinuses. And we always cautioned them never to cut the baby bottle open because at that time, we didn't really call them biofilms, but the slime that would accumulate in them. And, we always knew that that was a risk, but we didn't really do anything about it until this pulmonologist took it upon himself, based in Santa Rosa, to develop this kit, which is very simple, squeeze bottle with a lid that you can unscrew, and then salt packets, right? So selling plastic bottles and salt was a huge innovation. And of course, we all know this company, Neomed, which is now a market leader in this area. And this you can see by the font. This is written up in the New York Times. So this talk kind of evolved for me because I realized that, in an academic environment, we're constantly creating intellectual property, and research is the cornerstone of innovation. We're also, as surgeons, really geared to problem solving. And so I think, all of us have a hack, right? We've all done things differently to try to be more efficient or innovative. And what do we do with that innovation? Sometimes we just keep it to ourselves, or tell, a friend. But some of these things can be broadened for commercial applicability. And yet, in our training curriculum, we don't really have space to cultivate these ideas or strategies or principles. So I think in general, physicians are not really business minded, and that comes up a lot for uh, trainees that go on into private practice. I don't think we're necessarily equipped to think about ourselves as business people, and in particular academicians. That's not something that we really have to think about a lot. So my experience is that when I talk to trainees, there's a lot of interest in entrepreneurial activities, but not necessarily the feeling that a trainee might be equipped for working in this area. So this talk will cover different forms of medical entrepreneurship, and what advice, if I think back, what advice would I want to give myself 25 years ago? And then I just want to share, I'm at a point in my career where I have nothing to hide. So I really want to share, mistakes that I've made, lessons that I've learned, and hopefully people can benefit from that. So I've been in academic practice my whole career. I was very fortunate to choose rhinology at a time that it was really just an emerging discipline. When I applied for fellowship, I had a choice of 2 fellowships, and now the graduating residents will be able to choose from 35 fellowships. So give you a sense of, in the course of my career, how much that field has grown. And in that vein, there's been a lot of opportunities to innovate just by the nature of the emerging nature of the field. So I've had a chance to do a number of different forms of entrepreneurial activities, from consulting to having my own chance to develop a startup. And being at Stanford has really been a wonderful opportunity. And being at UCSF, you share in this rich environment that we all practice in. And we're just geared towards innovating, and it's almost an expectation that practicing in the Bay Area is associated with some type of innovation. And so I just surveyed my colleagues because I didn't know exactly what everybody is up to, but I knew that people had projects that they were working on. So just a sample of some of the things that are going on in my department. Chris Folsinger is working on a next generation video loop for improved surgical visualization. My colleague in the department of, or in the division of rhinology, Zara Patel, is working on an olfactory implant as a point of neurostimulation. And our basic science wing, we have Alan Chang and Tony Ricci, who are looking at designing non-ototoxic aminoglycosides, and Tulio Valdez also in the drug area, looking at nanoparticle-based drug delivery. And you can just see the whole range. And Nick Blevins working on surgical simulation. So, I'm sure at UCSF, the faculty and residents are equally interested and active in working on areas of innovation. So that's the environment that we practice in. And so I think, if you're training in this environment, you're going to want to participate in that at some point in your career, I think, for many of us. So this is a 10-step program, 10 steps to prepare yourself for medical entrepreneurship. So first, number one, know your worth. I think that, when we go to work and we do surgery, we take care of patients, it's very easy for us to understand the worth that we bring to our patients and to our community. But when we leave the hospital, I think our sense of what our worth is a little bit more uncertain. And my feeling is that physicians underestimate the value that we bring to any kind of work that we do outside the hospital. We are very well trained. We have specialization and subspecialization. In an academic environment, we're very published or authoritative. And I also think that when we choose to do work outside of our clinical work, there's an opportunity cost. And as higher income individuals, there's a higher opportunity cost. So we don't want to undersell ourselves for the value that we bring to any type of business proposition. And if early on in your career, of course, you're not going to be able to earn as much, but it's important to understand your value. And sometimes you just trade off um, maybe, the amount of money that you would earn for the experience that you get. And as you gain more experience, more opportunities will come your way. One thing that some people aren't really aware of is that these consultancies are negotiable. And so there is an hourly rate, and you may receive a boilerplate agreement as a consultant. But if you think that you're worth more than that, that is something that is negotiable. And you can provide your CV, and they have internal mechanisms to review that to assess the value of your consultancy. But the companies aren't necessarily going to share that with you because they would, of course, like you to just sign on and move forward. In the startup world, if you're working as a consultant or as a co-founder, the compensation will be in terms of equity usually. And if you're a consultant working for a very small startup, they're cash strapped. So the currency is equity options. That's something that you really want to develop an understanding about in terms of the financial risk for that, the tax consequences. You can mix hourly rates and options if you don't necessarily believe that the company is destined for success. And so that's a very different type of arrangement that requires a little bit of preparation for. I think it's really important to just know that you're brimming with value. You're brimming with experience, knowledge, your opinions count. And so don't give away your time and your experience. Um, there will be a lot of casual conversations, and people will drop in your OR and, oh, I want you to meet our manager, or I want you to meet the director of such and such for, strategy for this company or that. And you may be engaging in really interesting conversations. Um, those are worth something. And I used to just engage freely and just tell people what I think because I thought, wow, they really care about what I think, and that's great. Um, then I started to realize that, there's value in that, and that's also my time, right? So if I'm not taking care of a patient, or I'm sorry, if I'm talking to somebody, it's because I'm setting aside time away from a patient or from teaching a resident. So I am more careful now about that. And so it's not that I monetize every interaction, but if something is really different from just being oriented to a new product, and somebody wants to sit down and talk about, vision or strategy or opinion, then I ask, are we on consulting time or not? And I think that, you shouldn't hesitate to make your intentions clear with that. Um, and so you can ask for consulting fees if they're really asking for a big commitment. And so, how do you assess your worth in this? Um, as you become more experienced, more published, more well-known, of course, you can charge more, but you may not really understand your market. Some of that will vary according to where you practice. And with a startup, how far along is the startup? So these are times when you can ask trusted colleagues for assessments. What's the assessment for their assessment of your experience? What do they think you would be worth on the market? And that can help you gauge your own rates as you move through different consultancies. So just some of the things that I experienced when I first got to Stanford, which was in 2005. I got a phone call from one of the big VC companies, and they said, "Oh, we heard that you're at Stanford now, and we want to learn about the landscape for surgical navigation and your view of the future of sinus surgery." So I thought, oh, this is great. I just landed here at Stanford, and already these companies, are these VC firms are interested in talking to me. So I was very flattered, and I thought, okay, sure, I'll meet with you. And I'm thinking, oh, they must, want to eventually like bring me on as some kind of a consultant for an investment they're looking at. So I, set up time in our boardroom and met with them. In an hour, I gave them a tremendous amount of information because I wanted to show them that I was knowledgeable, and it was well attended. And at the end, they said, "Thank you. You were very, it's amazing how much you could share with us." And I never heard from them again. And I just realized that, I I didn't know the nature of that relationship, and I just kind of gave away everything that I knew, and they got what they needed, and they moved on. And I only have myself to blame because I should have recognized that in that moment I'm already giving them something that's of tremendous value. And so, fast forward later on in my career, I got a random email from a VC firm looking at investment in a particular drug, and it was based on a clinical trial that I had done. And so I said, "Oh, yes, I'm happy to meet with you, but it needs to be in a consultancy." I spent the same hour uh, on Zoom talking to VCs, and I got paid for it. And they were very happy. They did not hesitate to set up a consultancy with me, and a very different interaction. So, those are two different tracks that you can choose. And I think a little bit it was just because I didn't really know my worth, earlier on in my career. Um, in terms of the corporate consulting, well, friend consulting, some people will try to get your attention to say, "Hey, I'm a adjunct professor at Stanford, and can I talk to you about this investment?" And I don't treat somebody just because they have some sort of connection with me necessarily as a friend. And so you can sort that out on your own. But as you become, as your opinion becomes more valued, there will be lots of different people that will try to seek your opinion and try to find a connection to you. In terms of corporate consulting, I did, this is very recent. I did some consulting for Stryker's endoscopy unit, and they gave me a contract that was clearly, they wanted my consulting services and my neurosurgery partner. And so they gave me a contract, and they had this lab coming up, within 2 weeks. And they said, "Okay, please sign the contract, and we'll see you in 2 weeks." And I just said, "No, uh, what this isn't what I normally consult at." And so it was a little bit disruptive to their flow. And I basically stood my ground, and I said, "This is what I usually charge." Um, and so uh, I ended up missing that lab, and it was fine because ultimately they came back to what I had asked for after that, and I picked up the consultancy with the next meeting. And then I later found out that Stryker has different level tiers of consulting, and they were offering the neurosurgeon far more than what they offered me up front. And then in terms of startup consulting, I did have the opportunity to consult for which is the company that made the cryotherapy device for rhinitis. And I was an early stage consultant for them. I wrote papers, designed clinical trials, presented the data, and I think, really did my job as a consultant. I learned a lot. I'll talk about that a little bit more in the talk. But after a few years, I realized that, they weren't going to really increase any equity that I had in the company as a consultant. And so I just, had a really frank conversation with them. And I said, I think that I've done everything that you've asked me to do, and perhaps exceeded your expectations for this. And if I'm going to continue as a consultant, I need to either renegotiate my contract, or I have to just calibrate my effort towards this. And I think they immediately came back with additional equity, but it was only because I opened that conversation, and I realized that I shouldn't really be investing more time into that effort because I had already done what was expected. So they were never going to come back to me and say, "Oh, Peter, we realized you worked so hard on this, and you're under paid. Let's give you more equity." It's business too. So that's just another example of just being confident of knowing the value that you bring and being willing to negotiate. So we talked a little bit about that, just gauging, your own level of expertise with peers to help you gain confidence in asserting your value. So number two, develop and protect your IP. So I finished my fellowship in '97. And so this is, 3 years into my career. So very early on, I was invited to Medtronic headquarters, And I was just really honored to go there. They wanted my opinion about things. We went to a lab. I signed my agreement, and the agreement is, that you discuss topics in rhinology, and any IP that comes out of that is owned by Medtronic, of course. So we were in the lab, and I was saying, with the curved shaver blade, and for those of you that don't do rhinology, this is the microdebrider with the little window that faces towards you when it's a curved instrument. I said, oh, it'd be cool to have a rotating blade so that you could shave opposite of that and shave in any direction. So, they kind of made some notes. Oh, oh, that's an interesting idea. And then we talked about a lot of other things. Um, and then 2 years later, they announced this shaver with a rotatable blade, and it won a Medical Device Excellence Award. And my name isn't anywhere on there, but it really didn't need to be, because that was something that was part of the contract that I signed, right? But I knew that at some point I planted a seed or something that led to that innovation. And that's fine. I'm not bitter about that at all, because that was in the nature of the contract. But just shows you that you can generate your own ideas, and some of them you don't have to give away. This was just a spur of the moment thought that I had. Um, but you will continue to generate ideas, and some of them may have value. So if you have an idea that is your own, it's definitely okay to keep that to yourself and incubate it privately and cultivate it over years. Um, if you have something that's not protected in terms of your IP, don't necessarily volunteer that unless you just say, this is not something that I'm going to work on. I'm willing to let it go. It can be big or small, and it doesn't have to be something that's hugely transformative. Small ideas are interesting to develop also. I think it's important to learn from other specialties, so we can read literature in other fields. There's so many parallels in what we do in otolaryngology from other fields, not necessarily even surgical fields. But a lot of our instruments have been borrowed from other specialties. For example, there's a lot of commonalities in pathophysiology. So I think it's great to branch out, also make friends with engineers, and then look at old literature. Look at historical books. I mean, there are a lot of things that can be revisited uh, through the lens of new technology, where old ideas still have a lot of validity and can be, renewed and refreshed with current technology. Write things down. So date and time your entries, be as detailed as possible with your sketches. It's okay to ask somebody if you can just write down, take notes on meetings that you have. I don't think you necessarily need to have, signed disclosure statements with everybody that you meet, and certainly VCs won't do that. But there's a code here that when you discuss things, that they're going to be confidential, but it's definitely good to document your development of your own ideas over time. And then inquire about the patentability of your work. So if your work is using academic resources, institutional resources, then of course your institution is going to own part of that. And UCSF and Stanford have very well developed innovation offices and technology transfer offices. I've used Stanford's for a few different ideas, and they've been very helpful doing the patent searches. If they think there's something that's worthwhile, then they file the patent, they pay for the patent. If it's your own idea, you don't have to, at least at Stanford, you don't have to use your institutional resources. I know that varies by institution. At Harvard, I think no matter what you generate, even if it's not using academic resources, Harvard owns part of it, but Stanford is not that way. So at Stanford, if you have an idea that's your own, as long as you don't use any Stanford resources, so I keep my own Gmail account, you can choose to file your own patents, and that's your own, you're taking your own risk, but then you own it. So it's really important to understand those guidelines, and the attorneys in your technology development office are going to be very helpful. Step 3, learn how to partner with industry. So if this is something that you are interested in doing, take the opportunity to work with them when you're given these opportunities. And it really can vary. It could just be sitting around a table, it could be going to the lab. And I think that, that you can look at it like an audition in the sense that you want to show them that you're knowledgeable. You want to leverage research skills. So for me, like early in my career, I did a lot of animal models of surgery and looking at biocompatibility of new packing and biomaterials. And that was really helpful when I started working with some startup companies. So, all these uh, things that you have worked on in an academic way can be leveraged in your entrepreneurial activities. So for me, the working in the biomaterial, because I knew the animal model, I helped Intersect um, test their animal model for their first drug-eluting stent. So you can see in the forceps, that's the rabbit-sized propel stent. And we did those biocompatibility studies early on with Intersect. You'll probably be working on a team if you're working in product development with industry. So you may be the only clinician. So understand, the engineering perspective, learn from them. Definitely be honest. You don't want to just tell people what you think they want to hear. It's very important to be objective. And so I mentioned that I worked with X, which made Clarifix, and just to kind of show you some of the things that I did that I really learned a lot from. This was the finished product that went to market, but there was a lot of steps in between. And so this is treating rhinitis with cryotherapy, and this was a move away from surgical treatment because the oldest technologies, or the oldest surgeries that were described, such as videoneurectomy, were just unacceptable in terms of their outcomes and affecting potentially the tearing function. So these co-founders found me, and I had already had an interest in surgical treatment with the posterior nasal nerve section, so I understood the anatomy a bit. And they were taking an old technology, freezing cryotherapy, and applying it with an endoscopically applied applicator and handpiece. And I know that Dr. Johnson's in the audience, and he was very instrumental in this too. And we worked together quite a bit on this device. So they wanted to repurpose old technology. They had good engineering teams, but they didn't really have the clinical background. So that's where Dr. Johnson and myself were helpful to fill that in. And so here we're working with different prototypes. The guy in the seat is the engineer, so he's getting direct feedback on his own um, prototypes. And here we're looking at, the different size of the paddles and the curvature of the applicator going in, the size of the balloon. So these are all, really small nuanced things that are really fun to be on the inside of in terms of understanding the development of a product. And that led, you can see it's quite similar to the final product, but not quite the same as what is on the market here, which is the final product here that X took to market. So ultimately, X was acquired by Stryker. So the founders were successful because they had a profitable medical device and a successful exit. For me, it was more about learning the different phases of medical device development from the concept through FDA clearance to eventually being acquired. And as I mentioned, it doesn't have to be like a huge transforming idea. You can have minor ideas that still have value. So I'm not sure if you use the Spywake sheaths. This is a startup company out of Washington. And these are basically sheaths that protect the nasal airway for endoscopic skull-base surgery. And when we were working together, I was working with one of the neurosurgery skull-base fellows, and he said, well, these are not really good, but why do we have a complete ellipse there? The middle part, the medial part, is in the way of our scopes and our instruments. And so he started cutting them out. So this is a view of the sphenoid for a transsphenoidal approach. And he would just cut out that medial portion on either sheath so that the central portion was open and not obstructed by the sheath, like that. And so we called it the Asmaro modification, and I was talking to him. I said, hey, this could be something that the company might be interested in. And he was entrepreneurial in his mindset. So I kind of mentored him through just the idea of documenting it, approaching the CEO. He did a signed and dated concept. He got to meet with the CEO, and he was brought on as a consultant with a royalties agreement that was pending. But just an idea, a small hack, a small innovation led to, for him in his career, a really valuable early experience in trying to bring ideas to fruition. So you may have different reasons why you want to be working with industry, and they range from financial compensation to just like learning about a new area, learning a regulatory pathway. So you just have to decide for yourself what that value is for you. So number four is really important, maintain your integrity and ethics. This is really foremost. I mean, in terms of the importance, I would say this is number one. But I would also say that entrepreneurship and academics are not mutually exclusive. And just imagine, though, anything that you work on could show up on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, and how would that make you feel? You know, if you're really transparent about things, it shouldn't bother you. Um, so you have to be really careful about your boundaries, and to be you don't want to have a reputation for just being subservient to industry in the work that you do. And of course, around here we have, the very dark shadow of Theranos, and nobody wants to be part of something like that. So just be honest. Most startups aren't looking for cheerleaders. In fact, your value as a consultant is greater when you can call out flaws or deficiencies. And I also always talk about conflicts if any kind of public discourse at a course or just in a discussion, I always share if I have a conflict before I say what I want to say. I think that's valuable. Here's just a cautionary tale. Ubiome was a startup that came out of UCSF, very well funded, and this was basically a microbiome-based company. The 23andMe of poop, that's what they said. So they started in GI, and they wanted to expand to sinonasal microbiome. So they emailed me, this is back in 2018, and they wanted me to work with them. And I didn't really understand what they were talking about. Frankly, it was a little bit vague, talking about doing webinars and working with a network of physicians who know and prescribe ubiome for patients who don't have a PCP. So I didn't really get my role there, and I stalled on signing the consultancy. And I ultimately, after several months of back and forth, I just said, I don't think I can make the time for your consultancy. Thank you. It's really because I didn't understand what they wanted me to do. So that was February 2019. And 2 months later, literally in the Wall Street Journal, not front page, but this company was raided by the FBI, and they were under inquiry. And this company was double billing specimens. So these physicians in these networks were prescribing these products, and they were charging patients multiple times for using the same sample. So this went to federal court. And you can see here they were charged with fraudulently giving misleading information to their captive network of doctors and using the identity of doctors without their knowledge or authorization, lying to insurance providers. So, I really dodged a bullet here. And it was because I had the sense that I didn't really understand what the consultancy was about. And I was, obviously hugely relieved that I was not part of this. Step five, learn design thinking. So at Stanford, biodesign is everywhere. It's part of the culture, and there's a biodesign fellowship that has been very successful in launching companies. You don't have to do the full fellowship. Here they have programs. Some of our residents have done biodesign programs, short track programs. There's a textbook that you can read if you're interested. It's a great resource for us. And it really is rooted in an empathetic way of looking at unmet needs. So looking through the patient and provider's eyes and brainstorming, trying to understand what the need is, and then brainstorming in as broad as possible, different ways of looking at solutions. So this is a very well-documented pathway, and has actually led to some success in otolaryngology. Let me just jump ahead here. So this company, Nasus, was launched out of biodesign. They've got funding after their fellowship time. I don't think the company has necessarily survived, but they were trying to look at improved drug delivery through different design nasal sprays. This is a more recent company, Spirair, that has a device that's currently being commercially launched. So these are two Stanford Biodesign fellows. Neither is an otolaryngologist, but they wanted to work on septal deviation in the office setting, and they have a nice product that I think probably was going to be successful. So these are just some real practical ideas about our practical examples of ideas that have become commercial products. Step 6, collaborate. So the biodesign model is to take a clinician and an engineer and a business person, and everybody works together. You will quickly realize that you don't have the complete skill set. There may be a few people, but most people don't. And it's really wonderful to work in a team. And when VCs look for investing in companies, they're really investing in the team more so than the idea. They know that ideas will change, teams will pivot, but how teams navigate those pivots or early failures is critical to the success of the company. Step 7, educate yourself. Just like in medical school, when we learn all these different acronyms, or in our residency training, we have tons of acronyms. There's lots of terminology on the business side here in the world of entrepreneurship that is very important for you to understand. You can even just start even with just looking up terms in Investopedia, but there's other ways of gaining knowledge. During the pandemic, there were all kinds of webinars that bloomed that were all free, and I took advantage of a lot of these. There are a lot of online resources for startups. There are also formal instructional courses. So at Stanford, through the School of Business, there's the Ignite program, which is a certificate program for entrepreneurship that I was fortunate to take. The one below that is one that's offered at UCSF. And step 8, expect an uphill climb. So just know that 90% of new startups fail. It's hard work, but it's really a lot of fun. And you get funding, and that's something to celebrate, but that's just the beginning of the hard work. So it's definitely a huge investment of time and money. You need to have a supportive social network, family and loved ones. You need to understand that there's high expectations. So VCs are looking for 10x returns on their investment. And there's a lot of sweat equity in entrepreneurial work. So just in terms of the final step, seeking advisors and mentors, just different people that I've talked to, and I asked for some quotes. Overnight success in medical devices or drugs, maybe 10 to 20 years, and don't do it alone. Really have a refined pitch and understand a reimbursement pathway for your ideas, because that's, it is a business. You need to be able to present a business proposition. You will have many ideas, and your first one may not be the successful idea. This is a quote from Rahul Seth that I think is really wise. And don't be discouraged if your first idea doesn't work out. You definitely will have more. So just lastly, my own idea that actually I learned about when I was resident at UCSF. It incubated for 20 years, 25 years, so small incubation time. And this was the idea that humming could be therapeutic for sinus disease. And I never really understood it, and I just kind of put it away for a long time because it just seemed really out there, very fringe. But it stuck with me, and I worked with these two co-founders to think about ways to develop a non-pharmacological treatment for nasal congestion. And our understanding of the mechanism has kind of evolved to neuromodulation. We think that it works around the sphenopalatine ganglion to regulate the autonomic inputs to the nose. So this device is called Sonu, and it's a headband that you wear. It uses a face scan to calculate the volume of your maxillary and ethmoid sinuses in your nasal cavity based on surface anatomy. And then it calculates that resonant frequency to maximize vibration that induces vasoconstriction and stimulates mucociliary clearance. So our pathway here was first just getting the idea, self-funded cadaver studies, Our CEO was my patient actually, and he was also an engineer. So he developed a smartphone app that was a real innovation to this idea. We had a pilot study that we published. We did some pilot work where it seemed like it was a real effect, and this is an endoscopic view of the right nasal cavity with the inferior turbinate, highlighting the decongestant effect within a few minutes here. So then we started pitching to VCs, got a lot of declines, but that helped us and helped us to refine our pitch. Ultimately, we had an RCT that led to FDA clearance, and we closed a seed round that is now allowing us to commercialize the product. I'm just going to jump over all of this. So we achieved FDA clearance in December, and so we're now on the market. So, being part of this team is really, really great. There's no way that I could have done any of this on my own, and I'm learning so much from my partners in many, many aspects of the startup world. So where are we in Sound Health, the company? We're not anywhere near viability. We're not even break even. We're not profitable at all. So we're still in the valley of death. But there's much to be learned, and it's a really exciting journey, even if this just leads to nothing. It's been really something that has been a really interesting part of my work in this stage of my career. So I don't know what Sound Health's going to I don't know what's going to happen to the company, but either way, I've really learned a lot, and I'm always happy to keep my day job. All right, that's what I have to share. Thank you so much. I'm happy to take any questions.
Peter, if you don't mind me starting, that's a great overview of your journey and a lot of very valuable pearls throughout that. That's a ton of experience. I just remember myself meeting with people back when I was at Penn. This is in the mid 90s from a new technology that they called a co-blader, and worked with them, for months over in the wand and whatnot for nothing. And then they gave me a contract to sign, and I looked at the contract and I was scared. I could not believe what they wanted me to sort of sign away. And what I should have done, and what I'm sure you do, is have it looked at by a lawyer. Have somebody look at it who's done this before. I had never done it before, and I didn't do that. I just said, look, I'm happy to talk to you guys and help you any way I can. But a contract, especially your first contract, can be very scary, and having an attorney that you trust look at those and help you along that way is super important. So that was one of the lessons that I learned off very early.
Absolutely great advice. And yeah, I just think, when we're in that stage in our career, we don't really know what to do. And we don't want to like disappoint anybody by being tough or declining or putting up resistance. So it's absolutely great advice. And I remember those years, Andy. Dr. Goldberg and I were at Penn together when I did my fellowship, and he was still at Penn. It was
Definitely.
great times.
See, Steve
Question?
and Caroline are
Dr.
okay.
Lim.
Peter,
Oh,
thank you so much
okay.
for the talk. Quick question for you. How do you reconcile the kind of innately slow processes of university with the speed of industry? So, for example, I was in several situations where I was trying to follow all of the kind of university rules for IP and contracts. And for example, in their patent review process, they took a year to assess my right to be on the patent or not. By the company doesn't have a year to wait for these things. Startup companies are doing these things. They need a week, not a year. And it was very, very difficult for everybody concerned. Can you just tell me how you kind of navigated that?
Well, in my own pathways, I've just kept them really separate. Like I don't have like a huge research career in academics that has led to these types of things. So I haven't run into that, but I know for other people with really robust research careers, that comes up a lot because you're trying to commercialize work that's your main research. So I think, maybe the first thing is just to keep them as separate as possible. And like if something is really your own thing, to try to keep that separate within the legal bounds of your institution. Beyond that, I think I think the companies know that that's what happens when they engage academic institutions. And then I think you just have to sort of be the go-between to say, look, this is worth it and keep going, you know. I mean, you don't want to miss the train, but you're sort of stuck a little bit, you know, and maybe prefacing it with the discussions, like, you know, this is going to be longer pathway, but it's going to be worth the wait, right? Because then you'll have the weight of the institution behind you. I don't really know of a better way of navigating that, but
Thanks, Ken.
probably
Thanks
have
so
more
much. Thanks for
wisdom.
your insights.
Yeah,
No, really appreciate it. Thank you.
great. Let's see,
It,
Dr.
it is 7:30, so I just want to respect
Oh,
everyone's
okay.
time and allow those that need to sign up for tomorrow to go. But thank you so much, Dr. Hwang. We do have additional questions for those that want to stay on. I think I saw Dr. Chung's name first, then Dr. Shocker, then Dr. Jim.
Okay,
Thank
yes,
you
go
all.
ahead. I'll let you moderate, Michael.
Oh, no problem. Go ahead,
Dr.
Dr. Chung.
Peter, good to see you, of course, and
Great to see
glad
you.
to know you're back in the auditory world to solve sinus problems.
Yeah,
So the key differentiation feature between the university and Stanford is that you actually have the um, capacity to own your own IP. So the question is, was it always that way at Stanford? If not, what was their key analysis points that perhaps we can argue for a different way of managing university IP? And then, of course, you know, does Stanford have a standard deal if you should form a venture company in terms of equity stake?
they do. So they have their own, you know, I can't remember the percentage, but of course, you know, every year we have to sign this thing about you disclose what you're working on and you disclose the things that are independent. So like there's no surprises. And that's an annual disclosure. I think that this probably originated in the you know early 90s when the Silicon Valley boomed with computer, you know, generation, that they probably saw some really valuable companies go away, right? And they needed to retain some too. So, you know, they kept the Google and the Yahoo, and they probably lost others, and they realized like there's a lot of money here. So let's have a little more latitude. Otherwise, people are just going to leave the institution and start their own companies, right? And so I think that spirit has carried over, and they realize that we can still be extremely profitable. You know, we can still be known as a center of innovation and capture this talent that would otherwise just leave. And that's probably the origins of that. But yeah, fortunately, you know, we benefited from all that because it's just an accepted thing here that, you know, you develop your own ideas, you can do that. If you have an idea that's university based, they will definitely work hard to cultivate it.
Yeah, if you have access to that kind of analysis in the 90s, I would be very interested in making that argument to the university.
Well, I don't personally, but you could probably look at the companies that, I mean, I have like a list of the unicorn companies that had Stanford associations. And you could probably look at the unicorns that don't have a Stanford association, but had Stanford trained people. And those are the ones that I think probably were the ones that got away, that made them realize like, we can't let too many of these get away. Dr. Schalker?
Hey, good morning. Thank you so much for a great
Hi.
talk. I took the Ignite course too, and it's fantastic. For your residents who are super interested in entrepreneurship, I understand that the sort of limited bad design fellowship is available, but is there a standard curriculum that all the residents receive within your residency education program for entrepreneurial or business of medicine aspects?
No, and there should be. So when I say that we're under training, it's even in our program. And that's something that I'm interested in. I mean, I give this talk in a more conversational, like seminar format for more dialogue. But it only comes up every 2 years. And I really do think this should be more developed, you know? So maybe you and I can work together in developing a curriculum as they
That sounds
go
great.
on.
I'm thinking of grant money that's available right now.
And we can bring that in. I
Well,
mean,
thanks for the answer. I just didn't know.
yeah, no, the residents are hungry for it for sure. I'm sure if you poll your residents, they would also be hungry for it. So definitely something to be open to.
Great, thank you.
Michael, who else? I don't
I
see
think
it.
Dr. Jim was next. Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, Dr. Hwang. Thank you for a great talk. I was curious to learn a little bit more about your.
Whoop, we got a mute.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for an excellent talk. I Dr. Hwang, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about how are you thinking about your time, especially as a co-founder with your startup? I'm sure you have many people vying for your time, and as your co-founders are asking about where your commitments are, and then as you're raising or thinking about the next steps, like what is that conversation like for you?
Yeah. So it's all really new to me, and I knew that I would have to invest time, but it's all new. I think, I did some seminars at Stanford for sort of entrepreneurial physicians, clinicians, and scientists, and they would bring in people. And the model that they brought in was, I'm a Stanford scientist. I had an idea. I launched a company. I still have an appointment at Stanford, but now I'm the CEO of my company. And I thought, okay, so that was like an idea that I thought, oh, that would be cool to be a CEO. And then when the reality hit of this company, this small company that we're doing, I just realized I don't have the resources, I don't know the people, I don't have the network, I don't have the time to be a CEO. So we kind of fall into our roles. And like my role in this company as a co-founder is really like validating the science. I can't be there's no C-suite allowed at Stanford for people. So I'm just sort of like the director of research or whatever. But, I leverage my networks of clinicians. I provide direction in the ways that we should market the product or develop KOL panels. And so, it's a very important role, I think, but it's not like the CEO role. So then it becomes much more defined with something that's I'm comfortable with. It doesn't require like a lot of outside work. I mean, we're all doing work after 5, whether it's catching up on charts, writing papers or doing other entrepreneurial work. So it fits into that very well for me, and it hasn't really been a burden.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
All right, Michael, did we clear the questions?
I think we clear the questions. Dr. Hwang, thank you so much
Great.
for coming. I think it's brought a lot of interesting thought in our group, and we really appreciate it. So thank you
All right.
again.
That's great. Thanks for having me.
Okay,
Can
bye
I
now.
just say something?
Oh,
Go,
Hey,
Dr.
it's Will Ryan.
I will.
Peter. Hey, just great talk, and thanks for your mentorship over the years to me, and I think 3 pediatric ENTs here,
Yeah,
former Stanford people. It's great to see you again.
great to see you guys all thriving, really. All right.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Hwang.
Okay, have a great
Appreciate
day,
it.
everyone.
Bye now.